we're all wearing shoes. The shoes we wear, it connects us with the earth. It affects how we move. It affects how we can stand.
That's my house there. As we do the walk, we think it's a lovely day today, but if it was going to be muddy, if it was going to be slippy, if we were crossing water, if we're going, you know, if we're mucking out animals, if we've got to go into the dairy and wash down, then, you know, what happens to our shoes?
So, farm boots, wet, muck, that's always a problem. So they came up with what they call patterns. So this is a sole that goes like an overshoe. This one is hinged, so it bends as you walk. And you just slip your shoes in, and then you can tootle down the yard, and that just helps keep you out of the wet.
And it wasn't until after the war that wellies became freely available. But there's a lot of stories about people sort of adapting wellies with clogs. I've got a picture here. We think this is about 1900s. This is kids, probably 120 years ago, sitting outside this building, and they've all got the clogs on. You can see the clogs on the front row.
So these were excellent for first thing in the morning, because you could just slip your feet in without your shoes, tootle down the garden to the privy and do what you had to do. So, but in gloopy mud, they can be sucked off, and those were better because they're fastened around your ankle, but the hinge does fill with mud. So if you're thinking on a farm, they're probably going to be wearing something like this. Eventually it does get saturated, but what happens is the leather expands, so the seams become tighter. So the seam's actually held with a stitch, but as it expands, it closes that up tighter and makes it more watertight. So as it absorbs water, it becomes more watertight. So these shoes weren't sold with buckles. You bought buckles at the jewellers. These are jewellery. But what happens is, it's a man's shoe here, partly made. You have two straps with two sets of holes for your buckles. So during the week, working on the farm, you wear your shoes, fold back the straps, fasten it with a lace. It's a lace shoe. Come Sunday, you clean all the mud off, put blacking on. So they made their own blacking with soot and fat. Soot to make them black, fat to keep the wet out, makes them nice and shiny on a Sunday morning. You put your buckles in and you go to church in your best shoes.
So we're looking at 1851 to 1881. This is just the shoemakers that we know about. For example, there was a fella called John Seed, and he was 31, and he was a master shoemaker. And interesting, Maureen, he came from Combe.
Oh, did he?
And he moved up here in 1851, and he lived in a cottage in Lowgill when he was 31.
When I started making, my dad said to me, well, you can probably make a good thread first time, but it might be 5 years before you make a good thread every time. It's a very simple thing, but there's lots that can go wrong. He said, well, in that time, everything that could possibly go wrong will have gone wrong. You've learned how to fix it, but more importantly, you've learned how to prevent it.
At Fleet Green, there was a fella called Thomas Lee. He was 28, and he was a farmer and a shoemaker.
Your apprenticeship starts when you're a lad, and there were 7-year apprenticeships. To start with, you're useless because you know nothing, so you sweep the floor. Well, in the 19th century, they were going for the pies at lunchtime, reading the newspaper to the other shoemakers, but you're in there sort of absorbing what's going on, and then you start doing a bit. So someone will say, well, come and stitch this bit down here. So stitching down the sides is fairly easy, but it's a lot more difficult going around the toe and the heel. So you can stitch that bit, and then somebody else stitches that bit, and you come and stitch down the side, and you're slowly building your skills So by having an apprenticeship that was 7 years, those last 2 years made up for when you were useless at the beginning.
And then we had John Lee, possibly his brother, who was 30, who was a cordwainer and a farmer. And he lived at Beetham's, probably about 20 minutes walk from here. And Higher Stockbridge, there were shoemakers there.
In the past it was a lot more labour intensive. So we're thinking about shoemakers perhaps making a pair a day, say 300 pairs a year. So there were some accounts I read of a household in the 18th century. There was a mother and father, a servant and 2 children, a boy and a girl. So all the adults had a new pair every year and mendings. So the girl had 2 pairs of shoes and several mendings, and the boy had 4 or 5 pairs of shoes and loads of mendings, 7 or 8 mendings, you know. So, and then the father had a pair of shoes made into clogs. So if you're working out how many pairs for a community that need to be made, so it soon adds up to quite a few shoemakers. And it was one of the most numerous trades. Every little place had a shoemaker, even if they were working part-time. It was like the community was within walking distance. And there would be shoemakers that went round the farms and repairing and keeping the shoes going. So all these I feel a great connection to.
What was very interesting for John Wilson was his great-great-grandfather was called John Wolfenden, and in 1851 he was 52 and he was the innkeeper at the Rose and Crown, which is the pub in Lowgill, and he was a clogger. This is a picture of the Rose and Crown pub. If you know Lowgill, you'll know that building. It was quite a skill to make this the base of a clog. Instead of dubbing or anything like that, the sheep fat was used to keep your shoes dry.
But they were importing blocks for soles from Ireland into Lancashire by the thousand. So it's that industrial revolution that forges ahead with the clog, because it's hard-wearing, tough workwear. So, but it was a different trade to shoemaking. But my grandfather started making clogs when his bespoke business was going down 1920s, 30s, somewhere there. We started making clogs. When I started work, maybe doing 5 or 6 pair of clogs a week. But I haven't made any for 15, 20 years.
And when you think about how we use our public footpaths and what public footpaths mean, all of the public footpaths were about kids coming to school and people coming to church. If you look at the network of footpaths, you can see the route that the kids will have taken. You know, it was the quickest way, the easiest way. So, you know, how many clogs have walked these public footpaths?
Who had a bit of a reputation. She used to tell the children off when they arrived with dirty clogs. So the father of one of them came down with his children one morning, he hid behind the wall and he waited for her to give them a racket for having dirty clogs, and then he went in and sorted her out and said, how do you expect them to get to school with clean feet when you look at what they have to walk through?
In the clogs, it's making the sole that's the thing. The uppers are very, very similar, and then it's just nailed together. So the clogs develop from the patterns. At some point, somebody has attached a shoe upper to a pattern bottom and it became the clog. So we know they're there in the 17th century, but they don't seem to be there before. So sometime around there, they're doing this magic and making the clog. When we get things back to repair, sometimes you can remember making them, but it's like seeing an old friend again. Not the customer, the shoe. When you make it, there's a bit of you that's gone into it, not just your sweat and your blood, because sometimes there's sweat and blood, but a bit of you that's in that. And sometimes with the best will in the world, I can make it what they want to look like, or I can make it fit. So we don't make money, we make shoes. Money just seems to follow. Yeah. And if we have enough left, pay all the bills and have a bit left over, I'm happy.